stand tall. Words are blades that never fall. Debate like warriors brave. Every thought we give and save. Through the noise we cut clean. Spirited minds sharp and keen. With a spark that lights the night. Join us in this epic fight. Welcome to the Spartan arena, where minds clash and thoughts gleam. In the heat of every word, truth and insight will be heard. Buckle up and take your stance. In this arena there's no chance to escape the vibrant lore. Diving deep and search for more. From heartfelt talks to fierce debates, we explore what fate creates. Side by side we seek the light. In the dark our minds ignite. Welcome to the Spartan arena, where minds clash and thoughts gleam. In the heat of every word, truth and insight will be heard.
Welcome to the spot. It's time to ignite. Oh yeah. Operation Hangout. The feeling's just right. Chilling with the crew. We're ready to groove. Opinions flying high. Come on, let's move. Woo. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Pull up a chair, let's get in the zone. Voices blending smooth like a funky trombone. Oh yeah. Topics from the heart, making us think. With a twist and a shout, raise up your drink. Cheers. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Bring it down, shake it up, feel the beat. With every word we share, the circle's complete. Living loud, think it proud, that's what we do. Oh yeah. Join the club, come on through, we're waiting for you. Alright. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Hang out.
Spartans! What is your profession? This is Sparta!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Another stream, another live. You know where you're at. You're at Spartan HQ Network. I am your host, the Spartan, aka Peter. How is everybody doing tonight? Guys, before we bring in the host, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to post the rules tonight first because I have a special guest on tonight. He's my mentor, my spirit father, my priest, pretty much. So I like everybody, please respect my rules because I am not having any disrespect. Simple as that. And the second part of the rules will be on the screen right now. These rules are not negotiable. Please be respectful. I will block you if it is any disrespect. But I can't do this by myself, of course. I got to bring the president himself in. Please rise for our president.
Good evening.
How are you, Mr. President?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Hey, good. Hey, I'm good. I'm healthy. God willing, I'm here. Right?
There you go. There you go.
All right. Let's get the guest of the night in. What do you think?
Yeah.
Let's get our
further ado.
Let's get our Father Konstantinos on here. Hey, Father.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good to see
Good
you.
to see you again, sir.
Good to see you as
So
well.
it's been a while since you've been on. I've been over a year, I think, last time you've been on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very I know for me personally, that was a very eye-opening show. Like I said, I had never had a dialogue with someone from the Orthodox faith, and I guess I always had questions about that. And you were, graciously answer a lot of my questions, and it was just a great opportunity to, to expand in that area. And I, from what I understand, it was just positive received by everybody that we talked to. I think even Pete, he had shared that it was posted. I think it was some link on some Orthodox website or something like that. They got some views from there as well. So we were just glad to be able to have the dialogue and whatnot. So definitely enriching. So it's definitely good to share the stage with you again.
Thank you for having me again, and thank you for having me last time as well. Thank you. It's a joy.
Yes,
Father, like I said to you before, I'll tell you once again, you're always gonna have a seat at this table. I don't care what subject it is. If you want to join, you're always welcome. Keep that in mind.
Thank you.
All right. So, Father, the conversation tonight is science versus religion. As a priest, I want you to open the conversation first. So, what is your thoughts behind those two words, science versus religion?
Well, they don't need to be opposed to one another, right?
Thank you.
In summary, right?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on, let's get our next guy in here. We know him as Baby Groot.
It's bear paw, like the doctor.
Be nice. All right. Here you go. Happy?
Hey, it is what it is. I could be a grizzly bear when needed.
How are you, David?
I'm alright. Just finished eating. I had I don't know how many hour conversation with Wally, but like I said, we are two nerds going back and forth with ideas and trying to figure things out. And sometimes our idea it go to the deep end. And we trying to pull ourselves back out of it. So,
all right. So, Paul, science versus religion. What's your open thoughts?
Well, I like Father Constantino. I never looked at those as opposites. In fact, I think they are dependent on one another.
Mhm.
I don't think you can have science without God, and I don't think you have God without science. I think that I go back to Genesis when God says, certainly for man, you're supposed to take the world and subdue it and to control it, to have dominion over it. Now, my thing is this: you cannot have dominion over something that you don't understand if you truly want to have mastery over it.
Mhm.
And so learning about the physical world is essential, which is where science comes in. You can't understand the world if you don't know physics, if you don't know biology, if you don't know astronomy. zoology, and just all of the sciences, the disciplines that where science is nested. You have to have those mathematics. You have to know all those things, and I find it interesting that certainly in early, a lot of the institutions, certainly in America, and also in Europe, were founded by religious people. Some of the great men of science, Galileo and Copernicus, they were men of faith, and a lot of the institutions of higher learning were created almost with that express purpose that we have if you want to understand God, a part of that is understanding how he did things and the science behind it. Now, science is always evolving. We always have new facts, new information, new methods and methodology. But I think certainly
Oh, I think Paul froze. Yeah, he froze. Never missed. I think. All right, Dave, you want to pick up from there?
Um,
Your opinions.
how would I go about it? Like, what is the definition of science? Science is a systematic study of the natural world through observation, experimentation, and evidence-based reasoning. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. On that logic, it's safe to say God is responsible for creating science because, according to what Mr. Benjamin's argument was made, God gave man dominion over the earth, right? And Mr. Bennett did say clearly, it's not gonna, it's not gonna be possible for man to have
You okay
dominion
over
over
there?
the. Yeah, I'm taking a peanut and I'm drinking water, which I should. Sorry, guys.
I'm not giving you mouth to mouth. That's not happening.
You reach your limit. Oh, press that for yourself.
No, we're not hitting that button today.
Anyway, I was saying, the Bennett was correct. Man cannot dominate the earth if you don't know what you're using or you don't know how the earth operates. So it is safe to say that God created science for the purpose for man to understand what they have under their feet. And I'll be honest, after many lifetimes, we still have not fully grasped the full nature of the earth for what it is. Because there's so many fundamentals, there's so many facts behind how the earth operates, what it's making it take, and why some of the things that we are doing is going against the natural order, and why it's doing a pushback behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I would say. As a person who used to be a science geek, that went from being a science geek to being a computer geek, because I realized when you start going into the deep dive into science, there should be a limit to how far you go with science, because sometimes you can take yourself to the path of science to the point you're passing the natural order to something unnatural. That's how I feel about certain things. So as a person who used to love science so much for so long, and seeing how people have taken science what it is in today's time, I believe science was never meant to break the natural order and get into a realm where it's not only totally unnatural, but also ungodly as well.
Okay.
That is my viewpoint.
All right. Paul, do you want to finish where you left off?
Yeah, I don't know where I left off, but basically what I was saying was that again in Genesis we'll talk about again having dominion over the earth. Again, to have dominion, in part, you have to have understanding. You must have understanding of the ways of the world. And I think that's where science comes in. So, like I said earlier, mathematics, physics, biology, astronomy, agronomy, all of the major sciences, I think, are essential to that understanding. And so, and a lot of the earlier, universities and institutions, they were sort of dedicated to that. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think science is just another aspect of how we see and how we view God. But I think the fact that science is predicated on being observable and repeatable, that there's an order to things. I think that's why we can have theories and theorems and laws that govern actions, and we can plan around those things, is because there is a consistency to things. Even though science may change, but again, fundamental laws typically don't. And so, I always found harmony between God and science. It's almost like two sides of a coin, in my view. And that so I've never been dissuaded from the conversation of God and science. I don't think they have to be opposites to one another. I think they're opposite sides of one another, but still together. So that was my main point.
All right, let's get our little friend to which stock they're in.
Hello.
Mariana,
What
what's
is the
going on?
question exactly? Everything is fine. Because I look at the title, I think it's, what is it called? Science versus religion or
Correct.
something like that?
Yeah.
Or uh well, I'm gonna say this. I've been taught as a little, when my father taught me that, you know, science and religion he keep telling me, this God created this world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. And a lot of the stuff, I will say, is coming from existence from God, from galaxy, planets, um, the rivers, the lakes, the countries. Believe it or not, in the book of Genesis, I think, this world used to, speak only one language. And then God, decided to not have just one language, going to have so many different language, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and so forth. So I do believe science, but I feel like God has a hand on it, in my opinion. And I feel that, a lot of it, God give us ideas and thoughts, like from geology to astronomy, all different ways to understand different um, sort of all different type of science. Um, But I remember my father told me, don't think that God doesn't have a hand on it. God has a hand on everything. So this is what I was taught when I was young. And my father also told me when I was little, there was astronauts heard some sounds in the galaxy. They heard like angels. This is long time ago. I remember I have a conversation with my father. And I say, are you I asked my father, seriously? I said, yeah, they didn't even know where that voice come from. But of course, it has to come from, like presence of God, I guess. Those are angels. So, I mean, I cannot say, of course, you have some people believe and some people don't believe, unfortunately. But, I'm not going to be like, um, kind of crazy, but I do believe a lot of the stuff, what we have now, and, to learn, it's God always put idea, like in a way, kind of has a hand on it. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I was taught when I was young.
So, Father, do you agree with everything so far?
Well, if I may say, yeah, I, God, and science aren't meant, and they weren't intended to be opposed to one another. I think you want me to elaborate more on that, or
Please, you have the floor.
um, well, so there's a saying attributed, um, I don't recall if it's to Thomas Aquinas or someone else, but someone who has said, in terms of the clash between like science and religion, that it's either you have bad science, bad religion, or both. Right? So like they're not meant to be attacking one another. And speaking from like an Orthodox Christian perspective as an Orthodox priest, um, we've never been against science in the Orthodox Church ever. I mean, I can tell you just from examples from the ancient world up through today, we have many saints that are popular saints, like saints that we celebrate, that we say we hold up. These are examples of people who lived a Christ-like life, who lived the gospel, who lived within bounds of the Orthodox Church, who were doctors, right? So if they were doctors, that means these were people of science. And if they were doctors who were people of science, who were also saints of the church, that means the two both coexist, and coexist beautifully with one another. So, I mean, I can give you examples of saints like we have from the ancient world, from like the pagan Roman times when the Christians were still being persecuted, right? We have Saints Cosmas and Damian, right? They're actually three pairs of saints who were brothers, and they were doctors. One from Rome, one from Arabia, one from Asia Minor, what's modern day Turkey, and they were doctors, right? And they also um, healed people in the name of Christ. So, and then from again the pagan Roman times, we have like a really popular saint in the Orthodox Church, Saint Panteleimon, who was one of the early great martyrs, like on that level with George and Demetrius, right? He was the physician in the Roman emperor's court, right? And so so this means as well he was very educated for his time, and he became a Christian, and he even gave his life and shed his blood for Christ, right? And so he is still popular nowadays, and there are many miracles associated with him. Where we have a saying in Greek, "Koutsis travisto naio pandelimna." In other words, the crooked, the those who are lame, those who are crooked, to Saint Panteleimon, asking him for prayers, right? The doctor saint, right? And then in one of the main hymns for this doctor saint, we're not asking him for like physical healing necessarily always, but we're like asking him to pray to God for the forgiveness of our sins, right? And that's just from the ancient world. So it's talking about the soul, right? So, fast forward just real quick, right? 20th century, right? I have a little image here, what's called an icon, a sacred image, and it's of a Saint Luke, the Blessed Surgeon, right? And at the bottom of the icon, I don't know if you can tell, like he's got little medical instruments, right?
Father, can
'Cause
you
he
put it
was-
next to the camera? I'm gonna blow you up a little bit.
yeah,
There we go.
yeah. So he's got medical instruments there on the table,
Mhm.
right? And this is the Saint Luke,
Mhm.
right? He's a 20th century saint in the Orthodox Church. Lived in Russia actually during the communist times, and he was a leading doctor and scientist and ophthalmologist, not just in Russia but in the then known world at that time, right? And he's actually um, responsible for um, initiating advances that we have nowadays with anesthesia, right? And this Luke, he was married with kids, right? He lost his wife to tuberculosis. He winds up becoming a priest. He winds up becoming a bishop even during a dangerous time when religion was, and the Orthodox Church especially, was being persecuted in Soviet Russia, right? All the while being a doctor, all the while being doing surgeries. And every time he would do a surgery, he would always insist, to the dismay of the communist regime, but he was a respected doctor, and it was hard for them, but then they gave him a hard time in other ways, right? He lived life in exile for like 11 years, but he would always insist that he have an image of the Mother of God with Christ whenever he was doing an operation, right? Even there was an instance where someone from the Communist Party's family member was really sick, and they wanted Luke to do the surgery because Luke was a respected doctor, and Luke would not do the surgery unless they let him have this, like, an image of the Mother of God with Christ there, and they relented because he was a good doctor. Right? So it's just to prove the point that, and St. Luke is the same one who says that science is meant to answer certain questions and religion is meant to answer others, and science can't answer certain questions that religion is meant to answer, but it doesn't mean that because science can't answer them that the answers religion gives are not real, right? And that they're just figments of our imagination. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
David, you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I have a statement to make.
Go ahead.
Because when you're talking about the nature between God and science, it is safe to say there are two sectors in science, because the actual part science was supposed to be would be considered what you call natural science. You have many sectors, you have astrology and many other medicine that's also part of natural science. If you want to look in that aspect of things. And in modern time, we have another section which is the unnatural science, things that are not pertaining to that within the realm of God and its principles. And therefore, you have things like the plastic surgery and other things that crosses to the realm of things that are considered to be unnatural according to biblical principles. If you want to look at that aspect, because that's something I've been thinking about for the past maybe 15, 20 years, because the way I look at things, Father, what's your name again? I don't know the mispronounce your name. Konstantinos. He kind of correct when he says science and God is almost like two sides of the coin, based on how science was meant to be at first. But as man, we took science and took it much further to the point whereby it's just like biology. You have organic biology, you have inorganic biology. Science ended up becoming two different variations, where you have natural science, with medicine fall under that kind of astrology and many other facts that pertain to the natural order of science of the world. Then you have unnatural science, where you're venturing to the unknown, whereby you are doing things or you're researching things that go past the godly principle or the biblical principle of aspect. Things that shouldn't be considered to be a natural way of doing things. And when I look at it in that type of concept in present time, you can say the unnatural science is going against God principle, while the natural science is going along and abide within the biblical principle of God. That's safe to say?
Father, you muted.
Oh, I'm muted.
No,
There
you're
you go,
good.
there
You're
you
good.
go.
You're good. You're
You're
good.
good.
You're good.
It was probably
Yeah.
a delay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we have to be careful as human beings that we place a limit onto what we do, because there are limits to science, and I think maybe this goes into what you're referencing about the unnatural. Um, we have to be careful that we don't start playing God, right? We're not God, and we can never be God, and so we have to be careful that we don't start playing God. We have to be careful that um, um, that we science can be a tool, right? It can be a helpful tool. It can be a useful tool. But am I using it for good, or am I using it for evil? Right? I mean, and we can go into all sorts of directions with this, right? I mean, it's, take the example of a knife, right? Am I using the knife to cut a salad? Am I using it to cut some meat for dinner, or am I using it to hurt someone? Right? Same thing with technology. Am I using it to call someone check in and see how they're doing, right? Or am I using it, to harm others, right? And so this becomes important when we have lost sight, especially of like a God-centered universe, what we would say like a theocentric, right? Like using the church terminology, right? A God-centered universe where God is at the center versus our fallen human reasoning, right? Our human mind has limits, right? Our human mind can make mistakes, right? Our human mind doesn't know everything, and we don't even know everything about the human mind, right? And as I think the gentleman alluded to earlier, both of you, um, we still, like with science, still can't answer everything, right? We still can't answer everything, even in the world and universe we see around us, right? So, what, how is it fair then to say that science knows everything, right? Yes, we use science to help us understand the world, but science still doesn't answer the question why, right? Why am I here, right? Why am I on this earth? What is my purpose on this earth? Right? What is my, all those questions. And even like, and so this is, I mean, I think getting into some deep things, but even like in English, we say we use the word anthropology for the study of man, right? Anthropology comes from the Greek word anthropos. Well, anthropos in the Greek means someone who looks up. Well, what is he looking up to? What is the human being looking up to? It's with the understanding that he's looking up towards God, right? Right. So, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what I'm saying, any of you.
Yeah, I would want to maybe I'm not pushed back too much on David. I think I see where he's going with the comments as far as natural versus unnatural. I mean, I think science has always been, especially when you talk about science in the church. There's always been a history of things being introduced into science that the church sometimes would oppose, like when Galileo and Copernicus started to rethink the idea that the Earth wasn't at the center of the universe or the galaxy, that the sun was. That wasn't received very well, and people thought, kind of in that vein, it was kind of unnatural. So I think science always kind of pushes our boundaries of thinking. And I think the problem when religion comes into play is it's like if you have, again, these sort of set ideas of what is and what is not. Like I was just looking up earlier, algebra, that was mostly, I think, created by, it came out of Islam, really. That wasn't looked at very favorably when it came out, or that it had associations with the occult or what have you when it came out, but it's kind of accepted as, part of the natural, So I think anything that you introduce for the first time, I think is going to be looked at by some, if it goes against what you think or what you've been taught or what have you. If it challenges natural conviction, then yeah, people may look at it in a negative sense and then have these associations with it that we're sort of tampering in things that we can't tamper with. And if we want, even then, we have to also accept the fact, and this may get into ethics of science, that in the exploration of things, science has done some things that you may question the ethics of that we benefit from. When you talk about medicine, when you talk about the splitting of the atom and just different things that have done even in the field of psychiatry. I mean, I go back and look at what's like the early days of psychiatry, what that was like. And we can look at it now and say a lot of that stuff was pretty barbaric, but it, over time, it opened up, it continued to evolve and say, yeah, things that we might have thought back in the day, now that we have better methods of research and better understanding of things. Now we kind of go in another direction, but if we never went in that direction, then how could we know? Science is always making mistakes and making corrections. But I do understand that there is an ethics component to science that we have to respect, because as you said, Father, I mean, if you take a knife, you can use a knife for good or for evil. And where, and especially in today's context, I think of things about, what about cloning, right? Or the idea of stem cells, and a lot of these things that have promise of um, curing people of spinal injuries, or regrowing organs and things of that nature. But then people are asking the question, especially when it comes to the unborn, they're asking these questions. Well, look, how ethical is this? Because a lot of them would say, well, you need to use, the best source to get a lot of this stuff is from embryos, not fully formed human beings. And so I get that. Yeah, there's going to be some ethical questions and challenges and pushbacks on that. But again, looking at the history of science itself, it's always been a set of pushbacks and ethical questions that need to be asked in the pursuit of these things certainly over since the Enlightenment period, the last 500 years, where these boundaries always being pushed. So I don't know if I would necessarily call it natural versus unnatural. I think I believe in ethics, and I think there needs to be an ethic when it comes to scientific pursuits. But if something sounds different, a lot of times people take, if it challenges some of your sacred cows, so to speak, I think people sometimes push against that.
Mhm.
And so I want to be careful how I frame it, to say that, oh, well, science is going to somewhere unnatural. If it's in the natural world, then it's natural. So
Yeah. I see where you're going with this. Before we move on to the next question I have for Father, Mariana, do you have anything for Father before we move on?
Um,
Trust me,
can't
he
thi-
doesn't bite. I promise you.
I'm sorry.
So,
Um,
Father, I got to throw Mariana under the bus a little bit here. She's in Orthodox, also like us. So, but she's scared to come to church lately.
ay, ay, ay.
put your business out there in the street. You ain't right.
I got to throw her under the bus. You knew this
You
was
ain't
coming.
You ain't right.
All right,
Um, yes.
David, you go next, okay?
Okay.
Before we go to the next question, I accept your
David,
answer.
Mike,
You kind of
Mike,
you
Mike.
might.
Sorry.
Mike.
Before you go next to the, I accept what Mr. Bennett was saying, but we need to understand the reason why I say there's a thing called natural science and unnatural science. On the top of the food chain, when it comes to unnatural science, we have a thing called cloning.
Mhm.
And you know what type of aspect of biblical principle it go against. That's why it fall under that category of clone. When you talk about clone, you talk about creating another being or entirely. Which means you act as if you are God. And
We're
they
going to get into that in a
and me
second,
and
David.
I'm just saying this. Why I say that's an example. Why I say there's two sectors. There's natural and unnatural science.
Like I said, David, that's actually I'm going into that's my next question for Father. But let me get Mariana in, and we'll get into that next. Go ahead, Mariana.
Um, the question has been bugging me, and I remember I was, you know how when you're a little kid and your parents tell you this. I remember, and I don't believe this when I was a kid. Evolution. Okay, this, then my mom told me, oh, humans come from monkeys. I said, no, they're not. I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I know they show pictures, but you're trying to tell me, I mean, it's maybe similar DNA, but you cannot say that we involved, like, so you're trying to tell me we were, like, I don't know, millions of years ago, we were a bunch of cave people? Like, that's, come on, that to me, it's like a myth.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm saying I say, mom, I say, what do you believe in? Do you believe that God created a man, or you believe in evolution, like something that just came out of a
Okay.
fairy tale book?
All right. Um, Father, can you answer that? Because I got something to follow up with that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not the expert to speak on evolution, but
Okay.
having said that, what I can tell you is that what has given me peace and what I convey to others who do ask me about it is, number one, like God is the creator. God is the creator, right? God is the creator of the universe, right? God is our creator. We say in the creed in the Orthodox faith, like, I believe in one God, creator of Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, right? And of all things visible and invisible. And invisible includes the soul, and then includes the angels, right? So, and then in terms of evolution, well, I like to pose 2 points on that. One is, what we've noticed, and the trend has been, right? We focus so much on whether we come from monkeys or not, right? And what Saint Paisios, another recent saint of our church, says, and yet we, unfortunately and sadly, become worse than the animals, right? And then he
That is
goes so
facts.
far, as to say, it's actually, some people say we become worse than the animals, but he says, don't insult the animals, right? Because human beings do not do to because animals don't do to other animals what human beings do to other human beings,
Facts.
right? And then the second point that St. Paisios makes is that, he had said, I just consider it a blasphemy, he says, for my Christ and from my Panagia, he said, to be descended from monkeys, right? And so hearing that from this saint of the 20th century, that people that I knew, right, and that many other people knew, and then subsequently reading a little bit that there's another 20th century saint, Saint Nectarios, that was a very learned man, an educated man that also writes against evolution, right? That gave me peace, right? And it's given me peace to know that that others who were avowed atheists at one point and have come to, for example, the Orthodox faith, they themselves have also been, challenging things about evolution, right? And they're like honest and sincere, and people that research and ask questions, and they're not against science, and they might have a scientific background, right? And they, say, something's not right here, so that's what I would tell you, in terms of evolution, just from, in summary, from me, the
So
priest.
really fast, guys. If anybody wants to learn a little more about Saint Nectarios, is a movie named Man of God that goes over his life. A very very good movie actually, and I think you watched it yourself, Father, right?
Yeah, actually, we uh our parish and our sister Orthodox parish, several years back, we um we basically rented out one of the rooms in the Stroud Theater, and there was about like 100 of us that went
Oh,
and saw it when it
nice.
was in
Wow.
theaters. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So this is a follow up question I was asked recently by somebody, and I told him I was doing the show. You were on, and I told him I was asking him. So this person is a little bit confused about evolution and yeah, Adam Eve, how it came from. So she doesn't know which one to believe and how to break it down. How would you answer that question?
Isn't for me, Father,
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So um I mean, I'm speaking as an Orthodox priest, right? We believe Adam and Eve, we teach Adam and Eve are real people. They're real people who existed, and their story is real. And it's not just there for some metaphorical sense.
Hmm.
And in fact, Adam and Eve in the Orthodox Church are considered, saints of the church, saints that repented, right? And Christ accepted their repentance, right? So, we see that story as very real, um, and um, and we live with the implications of what happened. You know, I are you asking in term when you're asking they can't make sense of
Yes,
the
that's correct.
evolution? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, she goes to me. She's confused. Which one is the right one? Which one is wrong? And I try to break it down to her the best I can. Obviously, I'm no expert like yourself, so that's why I
I
was
wouldn't say
like,
I'm
you
an
know what,
expert. you know.
you gotta give yourself a little credit, Father. Come on. So David, give me 1 second. You go next, okay? Um, so how would you, when she's asking me like evolution is one hand, Adam is the other one. Which one? I'm confused. Which one to believe? You see what I'm saying?
Hmm. Well, um, I mean, from what I'm understanding and I'm aware, evolution's still just a theory, right? It's put out there as if it's fact, right? But evolution is still theory, right? The they're adaptations for, okay, and again, I'm not like the science expert either, right? I don't want to pretend like I am, but like they're adaptations that can occur within like a species, right? But that's one thing, but just it, I like that at some like we also teach in the reality of a soul, right? And God breathed uh, into the human being the breath of life, right? And from um, Adam, Eve was created, right? So um, these are, these are, I would say, just God-given teachings and revelations, and it's something that I we put our trust in, um, and we even teach that when Christ was crucified on Calvary, on Golgotha, that Golgotha is the place of the skull. Why is it called the place of the skull? And in Orthodox icons, you have a skull depicted underneath the crucifixion. Well, it's the skull of Adam, right? Because there's a tradition that Adam was buried there. And so, like, the blood of Christ is um, literally falling down from the cross and dripping onto the skull of Adam. Um, so, I know there are people out there that like to challenge everything, but there are people that like to challenge the story of the flood. But we find that the flood comes up in other mythologies than not just in the Bible, right? It comes up even in Greek mythology, right? It comes up in Middle Eastern, Near Eastern mythology. So that like tells us something happened here, right? And we see in cultures and religions across the world, cultures and religions that um, didn't necessarily even have contact with one another, that like there is evil in the world and there's a problem and man fell into evil, and the way to be delivered is through some kind of divine being, some kind of messiah, right? And so we find this in like not just like the Old Testament in terms of
A lot of people
you know,
don't know.
yeah, a lot of people it's not just in the Old Testament that there's like was an expectation of a messiah, but like even in Greek and Roman and Persian and Egyptian and Indian and Chinese and Native American cultures, again there's this understanding that there's evil in the world. Mankind messed up, and the only way to be saved from this is through someone divine coming and like getting us out of this mess. Right? And to the point where, again, Saint Nectarios writes about this. He had done a lot of research. And there are writings available about this in English. But he had written that Confucius had said someone will come from the West, right? And so if you think of China and you think of the Holy Land, right? Right, Bethlehem and Jerusalem are to the west of China, right? And there were Native American tribes that were saying that someone will come from the east. Well, if you look at the Americas, right, north and south, Bethlehem and Jerusalem are to the east, So, and again, even in the mythology, even with like some of the philosophers, with Plato and Aristotle, there's some they're getting at something, right? They're getting at something, and I mean, like, and with the ancient Greek philosophers, they were searching, right? And the philosophers came to the point where they realized that there was an unknown God and not all these different, pagan gods, right? But they didn't come to the understanding yet that like God was this personal God. And that's where, as a church, we say, okay, Christ comes in and St. Paul and the apostles, right? But and I find it, going back to the science point, right? To the science and philosophy and human reasoning, human mind, you know, the Greeks, right? That are like descendants now of these ancient philosophers, right? In terms of the Orthodox, we don't put our human mind and our human reasoning and our human philosophy as the center of everything, right? Through the church, at least traditionally speaking, historically speaking, again, it's God that's at the center, right? And does our, we submit ourselves to like divine logic, right? Because only human logic can go only so far. And so I know Mr. Bennett, Paul had brought up about these clashes at times, like a tension. That tension did exist in Western Europe, especially, but it actually didn't exist in the Orthodox world. So we didn't have like this clash that, as you mentioned, with Galileo and others, right? And so we kind of in the Orthodox East, we like bypass that, right? And so like other examples I didn't give earlier, like I mean, we things we take for granted, right? um at least in the scientific world, like Mendeleev, right, the founder of the periodic table with all the elements, right? Pavlov, right, the with Pavlov's dog and the conditioning, right? And physiology, right? These were men that were devout Russian Orthodox Christians, right? And they weren't just like in name only, right? They were devout Christians, So um, I hope that helps make some sense. Like
Yeah,
I
no,
said,
no,
I'm
it
not.
makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
David, you're up, man. I don't like a feeling that his fingers up already.
Oh, I do. As a non-denominational Christian, I have been in that debate about evolution and never liked how they turned out to be because from high school, then you interact with some college students who are into biblical study, any other aspect of that level of study, and we get in that concept whereby there's a group that believe in evolution, and there's a group that believe in the biblical aspect when they believe that God created Adam from his breath, from creating his body from dirt. Because if a Christian were to believe evolution, that means you're saying the scripture is wrong. And that caused a conflict. That no, I know Mr. Benning will have your own say. He's shaking his head, but that's something that was being put out there at the time when I was there witnessing the debate, going back and forth, and it gets very heated. This is why that term evolution it go either way. Some people wanna believe it within that realm of the body of Christ. So they will push against that or think that it could be a demonic way of thinking, while another group saying there's a scientific term behind that. Because I myself, I don't believe I would came from a gorilla or from a monkey. That's not gonna work with me. I've studied the scripture from King James and there's many other versions out there which I understand about that. that'd be a whole different conversation. But for what I've known, studying since the age of 7, I don't believe in the concept that evolution really relate because there are too many factors that it stands out when you compare the human anatomy compared to the monkey anatomy because it may look similar, but there's a differentiation between both on detail level. So that is where I'm not gonna talk about the protocol, but when you dive deep into things, you start to see there's a deviation between you believe in that evolution is telling the truth or you believe that the scripture is telling the truth. That's my thought process. I had to wait patiently until you guys finish so I can just share that thought.
Father, do you have any feedback on that before we move on to the next question?
Well, I would like to apply. Go ahead, Father, but I would like you can certainly apply.
All right. So how about Paul? You add to that, and so Father can answer this all together one shot. How does that sound?
This was because I was going to raise later in the show, but I might as well raise it now since it's been brought up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a serious problem with the test of orthodoxy, so to speak, that is placed on people when it comes to things that really, at the end of the day, have little to do with your salvation or not. The question of evolution is important, but is it essential? If you believe that, I know many people, godly people, God-fearing people, who believe that evolution was a tool used by God to create humanity. I have no problem with if the science says that I came from a monkey or wherever I came from, the man that God created, I'm good with that. Or if I came from an amoeba billions of years ago, that's another thing. So we get these arguments, right? How old is the earth? Do you believe that the earth was created in 7 literal 24-hour days? Do you believe in evolution or not? Or do you believe that God has a nose? Because again, it says in the scriptures that through the breath of his nostrils, so God has this big old nose. So again, but we put a lot of these litmus tests on people's faith that if you don't buy a certain version or brand of Christianity or thought, that if you try to introduce something scientific, we do have a fossil record. Now, again, we can debate. I've listened to hundreds of hours of debates of good, earnest people who just differ based on what the scriptures may be saying. Like, you talk about metaphors. Is some parts of the Genesis 1 through 12? Is some of it metaphorical? Is it do we have to read Genesis 1 through 12 in a wooden literal sense? Because again, if you do, then there's talking snakes and there's God with a nose and all these allegories that make that, some people take it literally, some don't. But I don't like it when you say that if you don't buy this version of it, and this is the problem I have both with religion and with science, is that when you do not allow new information to come in for views to change. And so I never thought that I had to be blocked in to say, okay, well, I got to buy what I'm being told, but either by the church or anything else. That I can look at Genesis 1 through 12, or I can look at, just what the message of the Bible as a whole is supposed to say, that Jesus Christ died for my sins. And is by that measure that I am saved, or I hope that I'm saved. But people want to put this on you, like if you don't buy this out, and it's just funny, especially the Christianity in America is really, I think, regressing in a lot of ways. That's anti everything, anti science, anti global warming, anti whatever it is. If it comes out by science, it's almost like the church's knee jerk responses to reject it. At least in Protestant churches, in these non-denominational evangelical churches, it's almost like a rejection of science in a lot of ways. So I'm not saying that these things aren't important. I'm not saying that these things aren't worth having a healthy dialogue and conversation about. But to the extent that says you got to choose one or the other, if you believe in any kind of evolution at all, you're demonic and you're not of the faith or what have you, when your faith isn't based on that, or that that the whole Bible's made up and it's fiction or whatever, and we don't, and evolution is all there is, that the physical world is all there is. I don't have to accept that either. As Father said at the beginning of the show, I think certainly science and religion answer two different sets of problems, or tackles two different sets of issues. And you can find that medium between the two. But it's like when you force people into say you're in either this camp or other, choose. I think we lose a lot of people, especially those in the scientific community that would believe or would like to have a faith, but they're saying, well, no, because you believe these things, no, you can't be part of us. I think that's a dangerous precedent to go down. And I really would hope that, again, more reasonable minds, let us reason together in all things, reason in the scriptures, reason in the science. And yeah, there's certain questions that we may not know until God comes back. But the fights, the divisions, the name calling, the idea you want to excommunicate people because of certain beliefs. Again, this has been through church history. So I think this, I've never liked that kind of binary choice that we're getting. There's a lot of things that we don't know that we're still finding out. And I encourage people to continue the pursuits. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents on it. But yeah, but what David was saying, I've heard those conversations too. I've been in those conversations, and I've never been comfortable with it. And I've talked to a lot of people in the scientific community that's like, man, do I have to believe that? Even though everything in my being is saying that, no, I don't believe that, the earth is 5,000 or 10,000 years old, that I can't be a Christian if I don't believe that. I'm sorry. I just can't go there with that.
Father, you want to give us your opinion?
Well, something that came to mind that I wrote down earlier too was in Orthodoxy we don't have this phrase like believe and do not search, but we say believe and search, right? Christ himself says, search the scriptures, for in them you will find me, right? So it's okay to ask questions, right? It's okay to research. What I've found for my own self and what I encourage parishioners and others that ask me for advice or look to me for some guidance, right? Or just as the priest, right? I time and again say, if there's something we don't understand right now with the church's teaching, we might understand it later, right? And if we dig deeper, we'll find an answer. And some of those answers are mysteries, nevertheless. But having said that, I know we have a certain stance on evolution, right? But again, I don't feel comfortable to be able to flesh it out just because I don't know enough to
and I think everybody on the panel respects that too.
Yeah. But I can tell you though, we also don't make the Bible to be like a scientific textbook either, right? But then I can tell you at the same time, we believe that whatever in the Bible is godly inspired and true, right? And very real, and that the stories are real, and that the miracles are real, and that God, who created the laws of nature, right, that science helps us to try to understand, can also go above and beyond the laws of nature, right? And so we also, And I think this comes down to something else too. Like we also by believing in God, again, trying to give an orthodox frame to these questions and suggestions, right? Like we in believing in the reality of God, it means we also believe in an unseen world, right? And in an invisible world. And it also means like we do believe in miracles. And so we believe that it's a miracle, for example, that the world was created out of nothing, right? So even like with the Big Bang, at some point someone had to start that Big Bang,
Yep.
right? So like and the human being is also created in the image of God, right? Which is, so important to remember nowadays, because if every human being is created in the image of God, that means I don't mow down the other person, right? Because that other person is in the image of God. So like that means like I treat that other person as if they were Christ, right? So that means I treat them with respect and don't like bulldoze them, right? And so again, we lose sight of all that nowadays. Um, and but I'm also, coming from a faith where again, we believe in miracles. We believe in the miracle of the Eucharist, right? We believe in the miracle of Holy Communion. And with like Holy Communion, we say we priests are the science experiment for that, right? Because we've been administering Holy Communion for 2,000 years under bubonic plague and tuberculosis and black plague and cholera and like epidemics and things of that nature, right? So that's going into a whole another direction, right? So, but again, just sharing again what I know. So, yeah.
The only other thing I want to raise, Father, you talked about the idea of theories. And I guess I don't necessarily have a pushback per se, but I guess if I had a nuance to that, when you talk about theory in terms of science, right? It's not just like an opinion. You know what I mean? It's a theory, just like the theory of relativity. It's something that's well researched. You have experiments done on it. It's peer reviewed. You don't just come up and say, oh well, I just have a theory that, it just doesn't come out of anywhere. I mean, a lot of why we have why we can have airplanes, why we can have or space shuttles or rocket launches or what have you. A lot of that comes out of well-founded principles that are founded and codified, but also subject to change. So again, as new information comes in, a theory can change, but it goes beyond just, someone just made up something. I think sometimes when you hear the word theory, a lot of times people just kind of go just to dismiss it. I'm saying from a scientific community or that kind of better than that. It doesn't mean that it's absolute or that, again, known theories that would have been accepted maybe 100 years ago, now we have a better understanding. But the process of something being known as a theory goes through a lot of layers. It had, again, peer review. You can't just, because anybody can say, oh, I just come up with this new theory. Well, again, unless you go and present that to, like, again, a scientific community and have it journal reviewed and the validation of your research and things like that before you can even write something into a science or medical journal, it has to undergo that sort of rigorous scrutiny. There's a scientific method that it must pass. So I don't want to necessarily lose or just dismiss the fact that, yeah, we call it a theory, but it can go a lot deeper than just an opinion. And I just wanted to kind of make that that kind of distinction because again, I've heard a lot of people who are not of that community or whatnot kind of automatically go to that. Well, it can't be true. It's just a theory. It can't be necessarily true. But a lot of times it is, or at least it is as of yet. If it changes, when stuff starts falling out the sky, then yeah, we may have to change the theory of gravity, but it's so far it's still holding up. Pete, do you have a next question, or you had to?
Yeah. So my next question to you, Father, is I know me and you had this conversation once over lunch, and I want to bring it up. So the question I always, I get pushed back was like, so you have your God, okay, yeah, and what about aliens? What about their God? Remember we had this conversation a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I kind of want to, kind of touch base that with your opinion on air.
Yeah. So, so, if I'm not mistaken, just so I didn't misunderstand, you're saying the opinion about we have our God. What about other potential beings out there? About
Correct.
aliens or whatever? Yeah, yeah. So, okay. So again, I just give you the position as a priest that I stand by, right? But what I'm aware of is that the way a lot of people have described UFO and alien sightings, right? Um, and the descriptions that people have given for them um, are very, very similar to the way fathers of the church, saints of the church, have described demons and demonic visions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's number one, right? Number two, um, um, there is an invisible world out there, and there is an invisible world of um, good angels and fallen angels, right? So the good angels are the angels like Archangel Michael and Gabriel, right? The fallen angels are the demons, right? And the devil himself. Um, a, a lot of people nowadays might act like they don't exist, right? Or they're not real. Um, I, as a priest, would say, well, look at the world around us, look within our own hearts and what's been happening, and you tell me if they're real or not, right? Because, so like, I believe maybe it was C.S. Lewis who had said that one of the biggest deceptions of the devil is to make us think that he's not real, right? So that's number two. Number three, I'm just mentioning from, again, the Orthodox world, right? There's an Orthodox saint, 20th century saint from the country of Georgia, who lived again under the communist times. And, he was someone we'd call a fool for Christ. So, meaning like he pretended to be crazy, even though he wasn't crazy. So people thought that he was crazy. So he would hide his holiness, right? And he also encountered challenges with the communist government in Georgia, who, just like in Soviet Russia, they were trying to stamp out religion in general, and especially the Orthodox Church, right? They had even labeled him as crazy, right? Even though he wasn't crazy. So there have been a lot of miracles associated with him. He died in 1995. Saint Gabriel is his name, Gabriel of Georgia, right? And he says that as the time approaches, right, for what is in store with the world before the second coming of Christ, right, and before the second coming of Christ, the reign of the Antichrist, whenever that is, right, reaching towards those last times of the world, that that they will that there will be people out there that will try to deceive people through these alien UFO things to like help them fall into demonic deception, right? And so like again, the way like I know I'm aware of the fathers of the church describing demons, right? And the way some people in the recent past have explained their supposed UFO sightings, right? That raises alarm bells for me, right? As an Orthodox priest, right? I guess you don't have to agree with it, right? But this is, what I know, right? And on, um, when it comes to salvation, that was mentioned earlier, God is the Lord. We chant in the Orthodox Church, and He has revealed Himself to us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So, in terms of the revelation of God, God has revealed to us what is needed for our salvation, right? So, I'm not sure where the aliens then would fit in with this, right? Again, from what it's worth, coming from me.
Does anybody have anything on this before we move on?
I guess I'm mostly neutral on the issue. I certainly wouldn't in a universe this vast. I certainly wouldn't put it past that there could be other intelligent life besides our own. And if there is, that God created it, and if there is a dispensation or a way that those beings relate to God, again, I don't discount that either. Would it be the same as ours? Not necessarily, but I remember reading in Romans when Paul, I think Romans 1-3, he talks about how God has revealed Himself to human beings, and he talks about even for those who have not been given divine revelation of God, we have conscience. Like people who not even taught anything about God, they still can move in ways, we're capable of moving in ways where we know right from wrong. Like I've always said, I think a lot of atheists I know are moral people. Like they have moral agency. They believe in there's things that are right and the things that are wrong. And I would say to the atheists, that's something that's given from God. They may not believe it or not, but it's there. I think it's there. So who's to say that there's alien beings or there's worlds out there where these beings exist and that God put some sort of morality or I guess a consciousness of Himself into the beings that He created. I think it's possible. Again, would I know that for sure? But I certainly wouldn't rule it out. that He has a relationship with them in one form or another, and that with billions of galaxies and things of that nature, I don't certainly rule out. Now again, I'm not waiting for it, and I don't certainly buy into a lot of the UFO conspiracies that people talk about, but again, the possibility, just given the vastness of everything, who knows?
So we kind of touched base in a few minutes ago with David, mentioned about cloning. So I kind of want to touch base and see what is your mindset that I personally think is demonic and we shouldn't even go there. That is touching some things science should not touch, I believe. And that's one of them, in my opinion. So what is your opinion on that, Father?
Yeah, this is where we get into the realm of playing God, and the Orthodox Church would, we couldn't support something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't play God.
Oh, I totally agree. Does anybody has any questions to Father on this specific subject or any comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a reason why I brought that my differentiation between natural and unnatural science because I remember when they first put out the theory about cloning, I first I thought that would be the coolest thing. But when I start to remember some of the deep reading I was doing over my early teenage years, I had to go back and start reading it further and I started to realize there was an issue concerning cloning that is crossing a threshold whereby people are now taking the act of God upon themselves, thinking that they're on the same level with God, they can create a being because they have been through it before, but that put into action that they believe they can clone themselves. The first step was to see they can clone animals, which they were successful about it. And as time progressed within the science community, it created division.
Hmm.
Where some were okay with the discovery, while others had a tie to their faith, aka Christianity. They felt like that it continued to be blasphemy or abomination to go to that realm because when you go to that realm, there's no turning back. You're crossing a thin line between humanity and deity or humanity or God who thinking you trying to say you have that same power because one, when you're cloning yourself, how you sure that particular thing you're cloning have a soul? That's the hindsight behind because we don't create souls. That is the skill set that belong to the supernatural, aka God can only do such a thing. But when you do something like that based on biblical principle, if you understand the scripture deeply, when you get into the realm of cloning, you ask yourself, if you do not create soul, you say that onto that particular being, which means you're creating a body for demonic entity in the realm to take hold on that within the flesh, take control of. And that have been discussed with I've seen that part take to the place whereby it, like I say, this is part of evolution, this is part of that discussion. Me and Tabitha have not been in the same group of people. We are here, some of the theory. Even I myself, being the spectator, I was taking notes on things, and I was like either fact checking or checking to see what would scripture say about the act, the act of practice. If they consider to be biblical, or because it's non-biblical, or you consider it to be an abomination, or you consider you're caught in the path. Or I know that they were going to the deep end, which I knew I said I cannot be a part of this type of discussion no more because this is why I say there's a difference between natural science and unnatural science. Because unnatural science, there's no boundary. Anything goes. So the further you go in deep, it's like saying you go into the deepest realm of the sea and it's hard for you to come back after you have gone so deep and kind of
Hmm.
like there's no point in turning around. And that's the hindsight because remember you had a discussion about another about plastic surgery, the pros and cons. That also is on like on a ledge whereby part of it is good for mankind and the other side of it is not good for mankind. You're going too far to the point people are taking it to the point they're changing their image. They're trying to be something they're not. I understand if you're fixing a no, you're changing, but some people spend too much money to claim to completely change the whole entire image to be of another person or make themselves a mirror of another person. And that is caught in the boundary. There's other unnatural sign that I'm not going to speak upon, but it does create a huge question on both ends. Would you consider to be something that need to be regulated, or you think something that's considered to be about nature, or you think that should never happen to begin with? You heard about the case by Frankenstein. Frankenstein was a unique of that's another aspect of how you call it reservation or reviving somebody, reviving the dead. That's another aspect of unnatural science. You take a part, you can raise the dead. Can you bring someone who passed away, bring them back to life? That's another aspect of science that people have been trying to venture in. And we talk about how either the spirit of Frankenstein, if it's real or not, because if it was real, some of your theory, it could be crazy.
Father, do you have any comments on
So
this?
Well, I it if I may share, it's actually some thoughts from helping to respond to what David shared. These are some thoughts from an Orthodox monk, right? And it shows like the point of where, okay, but we need to, put a limit, right? So he says, this is from an elder Emilianos, right? So he just was alive up until 2019, so he's a very recent, respected monk. He says, it is natural that the rapid progress in nuclear physics and in genetics should open up new scientific horizons, but also create problems and dangers for the human race. So it is obvious that there is an imperative need for moral intervention in the field of technology. What is worrying is the absurd and quote unquote carefree optimism of many scientists and political agencies. According to them, technological development contains within itself the solution to the problems which it causes, and hence it ought not to be trammeled, so that technical solutions to the various problems can arise. So, for example, he says, who can exercise control in an ideological regime when they are deliberately seeking to create a type of technological man? The saying of St. Paul applies here, let us do evil that good may come, right? So then there are those, on the other hand, who, using historical arguments and invoking our inability to predict the way in which interventions will evolve in the future, reject all moral intervention. So technology per se is not, of course, per se in itself, is not, of course, harmful, being the fruit of the reasoning and intellect of man who was formed in the image of God, but when unrestrained and unbridled, it rushes headlong towards its destination. Then it becomes, these are his words, right? So I'm agreeing with the words, but these are his words, right? Then it becomes Luciferus, he says, though not bearing light, but rather pitch darkness. So the danger for us is the absence of accountability in the way in which technology is administered and exploited, a way which has as its aim the stifling domination of human life and the solution of problems by technical means, regardless of moral and metaphysical principles. Right? And so then he goes on to say, um, again, just reiterating that like the church and monasticism are not hostilely disposed towards technological progress. How, on the contrary, monks over the centuries have proved to be powerful agents of scientific and technical invention, right? And he says in the medieval West, the monks restored civilization. The monasteries became focal points for the natural sciences, where mathematics, zoology, chemistry, medicine, and so on developed. And the most important inventions of the monasteries formed the basis of industry. And likewise, through their reclamation of large tracts of land, the monks created the opportunity for agricultural development. Um, and so, he says, the Orthodox monasteries lived as an eschatological reality, meaning like thinking in mind a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven. Um, and it like served as a model for us of an organized society with a way of life faithful to the gospel, embracing human dignity, freedom, and service to one's human fellows, right? So then the Holy Fathers say then that, what St. Basil the Great would also say from the early centuries, that there's just got to be restraint, right? And he elaborates on restraint further and spiritual vigilance, right? So, and the monk now, right, because he's writing in 2019. Well, he's not writing in 2019, but he reposed in 2019, right? Going in another direction, right? He says, if people, especially children, watch television, right, for 35 hours a week, as they do according to statistics, right, then are not their minds and hearts threatened by Scylla and Charybdis, right? Going back to, Greek mythology. are they not between the devil and the deep blue sea, right? So people have like lost their peace of mind, their self-control, their powers of contemplation, reflection, right? And these have been the challenges of post-industrial culture, information technology, and the image, right? So just different thoughts again that he shares that I figured I'd bring up to you. And people have become consumers and slaves, right, to things produced as well. For what it's worth, again, just to respond to what you all were saying, and just to share some thoughts from people wiser than me too. So, because like I said, I'm
that
not
was
the
good.
expert.
That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good.
Marianne,
Yeah.
you being a little quiet down there.
Oh man, now you put me. I'm sorry. Um, this is gonna.
She taking note.
Okay, this is kind of. I'm gonna have to bring this. I know the two first individuals that came to Israel. I mean, it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Now I have this is the problem. I know during my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation, during my generation, you know, there's a debating that there's more than two genders, and there was an algorithm I was seeing on Facebook. I see on YouTube. There was a child in the car asked this gentleman, asked, I mean, he's a guy actually. The child asked, are you a, are you a boy? He said, no. Are you a girl? No. So you're nothing? And then the child says, so I'm sorry, forgive me, father. So you're a crackhead? I mean, this is coming from a child. Sorry. Forgive me. This is a child. Like, why you want to confuse, there's human beings saying that there's more than two genders, which isn't not. And from a child to say that, because when you're trying to confuse a child, you know who you are. If I see you are a man, you're a man. If I see you're a woman, you're a woman. So why, you're trying to transition something, and I know that it's unnatural. And I see this because this has been going on for, I don't know, for the past, like, it's, I don't know, 5-10 years. Like, causing nothing but confusion. And it doesn't make any sense. And I know that it's becoming more a norm in the West, I will say, like transition and then changing in your organs. And this is also going back, you trying to change something that what God created. And then, destroy your organs. And then later on in life, you cannot procreate, whatever the case is, which is, damaging. And then this is very dangerous, especially for a young child, for to be transitioned to something that they should not. That's something that they should not mess with. This is where um that science should leave that alone. Like, if you are what you are, that's it. You're not gonna go change your internal organs and everything, and mess something up. And then also it's going to affect psychologically. And then, in the long run, there's been documentaries that they regretted, going from male to be a woman, or male going, or whatever, the vice versa, whatever the case is. And it's, to me, I would say that's unnatural. And I don't understand how. And I know everything is psychologically. They don't even know. It's almost like something that, like, their body and their brain doesn't match. And then they realize what I just got myself into, that I should leave it alone. And I know it's more like you should not went through that, but if more like, psychological evaluation, talk to a psychologist, therapist, um, just, not to do something and you end up regretting it, because there are cases about it. And I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, to me, it's devastating. Doesn't matter. It's coming from a child. And then of course, later in life, when they get older, it's, it could be reversible, but if you go to that severe, it's not able to get it back like before. So I don't, it just, that I never see that when I was growing up. And then it's becoming like all of a sudden it's such a norm, which to me it's not a norm. So in a way I'm kind of lost for words, because I know that for science to think, and doctors getting paid a lot of money for doing that operation, I will say, and they don't care. I hate to say, they don't have that compassion. Maybe they will tell you, "Oh, do you really want to go through this?" And then you realize it's not reversible. This is the problem. That I know it's a small minority group, but still, that this is not natural. This is not something that they should leave it alone. And I know that God did not make a mistake. Is what you are is what you are, male or female. That's it. There's no more than two genders. And that's all I could say. I mean, kids will be honest. They're gonna say what they're gonna say. If you say something that doesn't make no sense, children will say something. So, I am sorry I had to say that, but I keep seeing that video because that's so, you know, children are gonna be, they're gonna say how they're gonna say.
Father, we got on this.
Yeah, it's very sad. This is these situations are sad situations, and it's an example again of um, again
Hmm.
the church. I'm just speaking from the Orthodox standpoint. Again, the Orthodox Church is not against science at all.
Hmm.
So in this case, um, I don't know how else to say this other than like, um, I'm not saying you for now, right? I'm just speaking in general, right?
Hmm.
Um, don't come and attack me with one thing about science, and then when the science like backs up what the church is saying, you're
Hmm.
disregarding the science, right?
Hmm.
So don't come and bang me over the head saying we're like anti-science, and
Hmm.
then when the science is supporting the church's position on an issue like transgenderism and that there are only two genders,
Hmm.
you throw the science out the window, right? With all due respect.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not saying that to you five, right? I'm just
Hmm.
putting it out there, right?
Use it as an example.
Right. I'm using it as an example, right?
Hmm.
You know, we can't like pick and choose that, when it's in my interest or whatever, like I'm gonna take the cloak of science and bang everyone over the head. And then when it doesn't suit my agenda, like I'm then gonna ignore the science and bang everyone over the head in another way. And all the while, like these individuals that, they don't need to be taunted, right? They don't need to be bullied. They shouldn't be bullied, right? And you're never going to hear me as a priest say that. But like these individuals, right? They need help, right? They need guidance. They need prayer. And if you just like the science was saying, um, that like this is like part of mental illness of sorts, right? And so it needs to be addressed. And then like why is the science being thrown out the window here, right? So and I'm just being, because it's very like destructive for those individuals, right? When we just give free reins and say, yeah, whatever you want, however many genders you want, and it doesn't matter, right? Right? And so, and sometimes um, sometimes people just need to also be told no, right? And we're afraid of the consequences of, or we're put in a position where we're made to be afraid of the consequences of just saying, no, this isn't right. No, you aren't a cat, right? No, you aren't a dog, right? And if you take, right, like and I'm not saying this to like be insulting to someone, right? Like we're just taking the logic to its conclusion, right? So so if one of these young people that are struggling for whatever reason, right? What's their family life like? What's the home life? What is the brokenness that they've been encountering already and experiencing, like is that being addressed, right? If they're a dog or a cat, right, and they want to go to the bathroom, like should they be going, should we have the kitty litter for them, right, to go to the bathroom, right? If they're a dog or a cat, right, should they be, I'm just taking the logic to its conclusion, right? I'm not trying to be mean to anyone or like advocate for, harming anyone or hurting anyone in any way, shape or form, right? No, not at all, right? But I'm just saying, if they're a dog or a cat, right, should, like at school, for example, then should they be sitting at the cafeteria eating with the other kids, right? They're a dog or a cat, right? Should they be sitting there and having food from the cafeteria, from the at the lunch table and eating with the other kids? Should they be given the food from the cafeteria, right? They're a dog or the cat. Should they be given cat or dog food to eat? I mean, it's just like there's a limit, and sometimes we just have to say no, right? And we're not trying to hurt other people by saying no. And when we speak the truth, and we speak it in love, no matter how much like sometimes no matter how much honey we put on it, right? Some people don't like the truth, right? And then we as adults, like we have to think like these children are impressionable, other children are impressionable, other youth are impressionable, right? What kind of like a society are we creating for what's coming down the line? Is this the world we want, like our kids to grow up in, like right? And again, the lack of respect for the other person too, where we mow down the other person just because they say something we disagree with or we don't like. This is horrible, right? Where is anything decent in it, right? Like if you have a hard time loving someone, right, at least try and be kind and polite, right? They might not be your best friend, right? But so does that make sense? Forgive me.
100%.
No, don't apologize, Father.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have a point there, and I think a very respectful point. If anybody disagrees, please tell me. But I think with the way Father said it, it broke it down properly and respectfully. You don't have to agree with their lifestyle, but you can respect it at least. The other church does not agree with it, but we can at least respect it. Am I wrong, Father?
Well, we don't agree with the lifestyle. We can't force someone ultimately to live the way we suggest people are going to live, right? Right.
Correct.
I mean, people are given free will, but also like, but this is also important though, because like, this is, we're not being honest with children and youth when we push these things though. We're not being honest with them, because again, forgive me, like I'm just taking the logic to its conclusion, right? And maybe people don't even necessarily mean it this way when they're advocating it, but the implications of it are like very eye-opening to me. How is this not abuse? Right? How is this not abuse?
Yeah, you have a good point there.
How is this not abuse? right? And physical abuse and other kinds of abuse are horrible things. I'm not denying that, right? But how is this not abuse? But if it's state sanctioned, or if it's some segment of society sanctioned, that means it's right, right? But being right doesn't work that way,
Mhm.
right? You're right whether you're in the majority or you're in the minority, right? Right? Two wrongs also don't make a right, right? And right is whether you have one person standing behind the right thing, or you have a million people standing behind the thing. Hopefully you have a million people standing behind the right thing, but even if you don't, the million people are wrong and the one person is right. When it comes to right and wrong. So again, I can get a little animated talking about these things, so forgive me.
You're
No,
dead
don't
serious.
don't apologize, Father. Stop apologizing.
Yeah,
Trust me.
it's
I
just like I don't
ask
want
my
anyone to
guys.
think like I'm yelling at them or something.
No. You're not. You're not. Not. You can
Yeah,
ask these guys. I
yeah.
get very animated when I want it to be. Not
Mhm.
commenting to anybody, you guys. I see you coming smart comments. David, go ahead. I know you have a question.
First and foremost, on that platform, the two animated king. It's me and Wally. No one can outdo us. So don't worry about us. Second of all, Father, you're totally correct of what you're saying because in the scripture, Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to the end of the chapter, it speaks in depth concerning that type of mindset. And this is why the Bible is very unique for what it is, because it's already foreseen what is going to take place and in order to keep us prepared for that. When we're in that particular scripture, it says how humanity will trade the truth for a lie. And for the past, I hate to say this, for 10, 15 years, we are seeing society switching the truth for a lie.
Right.
So when you see that warning has been given to us more than 2,000 years ago, and you see how society is now doing the same exact thing it give us warning in advance, then that's how you know what the Bible say is actually profound. And it went into detail what is going to take place in that particular tech. And this is why when you mentioned what you said, I was doing that to the point whereby I know that a group of people will write the scripture in MTA subway on the LGBTQ poster on purpose. Say, read Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to the end of that chapter, just to show you, don't think you are in the right of things. So that is where I had an issue with certain body of the church are trying to make an excuse for something when it's not. I remember this when it got too political when Hillary Clinton was telling particular from certain black churches to make leeway for that, which is not totally out of your place because according to the Constitution, there's a division between statehood and the church. Statehood don't intervene into the church, nor does the church intervene with the government. They have two different lanes able to be separated. But for some reason, these individuals have not taken enough constitutional classes to understand both sides are off limit. You can't cross the lane into this lane and you cannot cross the lane to the other lane. But lately people want to blur the line. So I hate to say that if I want to be the cranky nerd, let's say that they're to a particular political party who need to go back to class and read the Constitution again and understand where you are reaching or not. If that's the case, if you were to take a civil lesson about more than half of the people in that particular party need to step down from being a politician if I were to go down that route. But that'll be another conversation. But what I'm pointing out is what you mentioning is very factual. Your group of people in Orthodox Church, the non-denominational, the Pentecostal, other than that, even Paul Benino, that there have been a discussion within the church to the point whereby I hate to say that a line has been drawn among the church community, stating that if you believe such, I'll call it nonsense that the word projecting, you gotta take a if you're gonna be part of that, then you're not part of the church. That line have been drawn more than a decade ago, and I've seen it in a lot of other black churches. I don't know about Mr. Bennett if you have seen that, but it became a thing all of a sudden. Because after that moment when he did that thing, then I see the Christian blog, and it was really, really. I'm saying it's not even a volcano conducted. It was a very huge deal because one, some of the minister, they constitutional lawyer or they understand the constitution and they call that thing out. It's like you're crossing a boundary. On top of you also cross the boundary what the scripture says. So this is why I say there are two sections inside the natural and the unnatural because it seems like we talked about it already during the conversation. There ought to be a moral boundary, but when it comes to unnatural science, there's none. There's no regulator in there. There's no gatekeeper. If they were the gatekeeper, they took the key, opened the gate, and leave it wide open and didn't know what to close it. Beside, on the other side of the natural science, there is a moral boundary to how far they can go. The natural, and that also includes medicine as well. So this is why I'm saying as a person used to be a scientist, I had to be so fascinated as a young kid. As I got older and I started to realize there is a moral boundary to how far you go into science. When you go too far, I hate to say that, a person into AI, to understand AI, then there was a theory whereby people believe you can download your consciousness into a computer. That could cross the boundary too as well. So there's a lot of weird theory that have been thrown out there. And I make it my mission to stay far away from such conversation because if they ask me for my opinion, I would say I rather not be a part of the conversation because it's not something I will feel comfortable talking about it based on the moral compass. I'm not a perfect individual. I'm a person who used to study everything I was a little kid since the age of 7. King James Version was never hard for me to read, and I understood what I was reading at that young age. So when you read it for so many years and you ask people to give you a better understanding of certain area of that content of the scripture, and you start to dig a little deeper, they start to ask yourself questions about if this is what it is and why the word doing this. Now become a thing whereby for a kid growing up in this world who read this particular content called the Bible and not seeing things for what it is, you start questioning your love for science. Am I wrong for loving science, or there's a level to how far I can go with science? Because at one point, I was thinking I need to walk away from science. I realized it's not a bad thing, just that there's a limitation to how far I'm allow myself to go into it. And then beyond that, it's like saying there's no way turning back. And that's what I made that idea, whereby I think technically speaking, that's exactly what it looks like. That two section in science, just like that two section in biology. Same thing the two section in chemistry, organic and inorganic chemistry.
All right, David, we're going to coming towards the end of the show. So, David, I mean, I'm sorry, Father, do you have any more comments on that topic, or can we?
I think Dave for explaining further and sharing those thoughts. It's challenging, So I mean, with that, if you have another question you want to ask,
No, we'll get into our final thoughts. So we're going to do backwards this time. Mariana, you go first. David, Paul, and you be last. Father, your final thoughts you have on the show. And if you want to put any, any other information, maybe the church or anything like that, you're more than welcome to. So let's Mariana go first.
Well, this is a good topic. Hopefully, will be something similar. Um, I don't know what to say, but I will say science. I'm for science, and I also, believe everything come in existence of how, from the planets we have, the stars, the moons, everything. everything existed, and I will say everything. I will say, um, it's also important to research to find, and you could look into it. But other than that, it's also is to be mindful, but also to hear two sides of the story. Like you had to, I believe, science, but I don't want to believe something that's like not natural either, because a lot of stuff, could be something that, um, I will say you can't play God. Like meaning you want to clone something, and that's not something natural, I will say. Or the topic that I was, brought up, like some people confuse themselves, they don't know who they are, and they want to change, and it's something, and of course they had to talk to a professional to know before, if you really want to do it, but then there's also consequences. And of course, God give us free will, so to speak. um but other than that, I will say, without science, I don't know how we, like, and also other stuff going on, but I know science is crucial for everything, for and science technology going hand in hand, I will say. So I mean, other than that, I mean, I know it was not my favorite subject in school, but now as you get older, I appreciate it. I also appreciate what, God given me knowledge, and it's so forth. But other than that, this is a good topic. So that's all I can say.
Forgive you for picking my beard because I was listening to Mariana and I enjoyed her final thought. Um, this is one of those topics I would honestly say I've been trying to avoid for many years because of the past experience being in the type of arena where we have this threshold of conversation whereby it's almost going to the deep end where it get to a point whereby either fight break out or argument comes out of it. And I know very well as a person who grew up heavy loving science as a kid. And at time I got older, I started to question the more comfort of what should be allowed concerning science. Now, if anyone who have been heavy to science, I'm sure you understand that the history concerning the terminology they use about crossing to the unknown or going to area of the unnatural outside that could we will call taboo. Resurrection, raising the dead, that's taboo. Corona we consider to be taboo. And there's many other apps that we consider to be taboo in the realm of the unnatural science. And this is why I always try to not be a part of that discussion because there's a level of maturity that is required to get a level of understanding of what African science that respect the boundaries of the Bible of our faith as a Christian and what level of science does not respect it. This is the type of conversation that I'm sure for people who are in the realm of science or who the realm of faith to look at and ask themselves the question, what have they grasped, what have they understand about the side concerning science and religion and where they stand on it, where they're more comfort stand on that because believe me, it's not an easy walk. Because if you're a person who loves science or then you ready to go to the far realm and then there's a chance that you can cross over to the unnatural realm of science and cross boundaries you should never have to begin with. Don't let your opinion about this type of debate be based on mine because this is my personal opinion. But I will ask for anybody who listens to this conversation should not just only take note but also research and ask yourself, the unnatural realm of science bothers you, or you feel like the natural realm of science is something you should be following going forward? That's your call. Second, checking to ask yourself with this: how do you feel about certain areas of science have been either being manipulated based on non-factual information not being put in place? That always have been a discussion. Because when it comes to science, the idea of science is something that's based on fact and observation. Anything outside of that, then it could be not part of it to begin with. But that is my thought process. So I'm hoping that this call to help somebody who may have a question about their moral compass or their faith. At the same time, their love for science. And that is my final thoughts. Thank you. I get back to picking my beard.
Well, first of all, once again, it's great to see Father Constantino again. Thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective tonight. There was still so much, I think, on the bone we could have picked tonight. I think towards the end, we kind of got into a more morality conversation, which sometimes these conversations eventually go there. It's like a toilet bowl. You just go down that rabbit hole. I wanted to talk about AI tonight. I want, robotics and just different things and get your thoughts on those. But again, we may have to have a part two of this show. Like I said earlier, I think maybe the pendulum has maybe swung a little bit um, from one side to the other. Again, Galileo was excommunicated from the church basically because he said that the earth is not the center of the universe. You've had scientists in the past have been burned at the stake for their scientific views because it went against the church. And like I said earlier, today certainly there are, because of the where science has taken us from the splitting of the atom. Certainly, there's a lot of moral and ethical questions that we have to ask about. I think there was a scene from Jurassic Park where you had Jeff Goldblum's character said, you worried so much about whether you could, you never asked the question whether you should. And I think that's valid to have. I think it's healthy to have, to talk. There should be an ethical standard to science, period, regardless of whether you're a religious person or not. And so I'll always opine for that. But I'm always going to be one who's going to be committed to discovery. I'm going to follow the science where it leads, just as in my personal faith, how things I may have believed some time back or that might have been taught to me a while back, I don't believe anymore. Or I'm able to look at things from a different perspective. I think you should always be looking to grow in your faith as well as your knowledge of the natural world. But the scientific world gave us this opportunity that we can have this show tonight because of science. And so I'm always going to be respectful of that. What I would like to hear, though, again, in spaces where religion is being talked about, whether it be biblical interpretation or the role of science in religion, that what really bothers me is that we're all supposed to be saints here. And unfortunately, I've seen people targeted. I've seen people called, called heretics because they may not believe, like I said, in a literal 7-day creation story or 10,000-year-old earth story, or that the flood was a global, that the whole earth up to the highest mountain was covered. Or all the dinosaurs were in the ark. I think people have rights to ask these questions. I don't believe in a lot of those things. It doesn't mean I'm not a Christian. It doesn't mean I don't love Jesus or that I don't promote Jesus and everything that I am and everything that I do. But I think that even within the church, we have issues in terms of how we treat one another. So to Father Constantino's point earlier, at least have respect, because we are created in the image of God. Can we have respect for one another? And I think that, when it gets to a point where these voices that are pushing certain beliefs, especially when it comes to biblical interpretation, whether it be, again, the age of the earth or end time eschatology, if you don't believe certain things, then you're not really one of them, or something like that. I think it's harmful to everybody. And again, I think certainly in the scientific community, there are people who would certainly driven away from the faith because of that kind of talk. But I'm glad that there are people of faith who are also in science that try to win a lot of those people back. Because I think faith, especially your belief in God, I think that is something internal. I think, God speaks to our spirit, and I think that is he's calling to us now. And I think that's a natural thing to have, but you can't necessarily, he's not asking us to shut our eyes to the natural world and what we're seeing in the world and what science is teaching us about things. And like I said, we may not know everything in the time being, but can we come to a healthy respect for different views, and that there's room at the table for those of different views? And if we showed each other Christian love, genuine Christian love for one another, then what impact could they have on the world? As Peter said, they will know you are Christians by the way you love one another. And unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of love, certainly in recent years, especially in the United States, by the evangelical right and other groups that basically say, if you don't believe what we believe, then then you're not one of us and you're not one of the faith. I think that's harmful to the conversation. And, for scientists and theologians, can have a seat at the table as we, try to find a better way forward. How can we live in this world? How can we love God? And how can we serve? Ultimately, at the end of the day, how can we use this technology that has been created to better serve humanity? And I think those are the better conversations to have, rather than saying, my bike is better than your bike. I think it's kind of childish at the end of the day. That's all I got.
Well, I would like to close with some further thoughts from St. Luke the Surgeon, which I hope just gives a summary from an Orthodox standpoint. And he's addressing first like people that are were attacking religion, right? And so, see where he, in this following excerpt, finds common ground, right? And where he also insists on these important differences, right? So he says, because these people believe only in materials and deny the spiritual world, they do not believe in life after death. They do not accept the immortality of the soul. And of course, they do not accept the resurrection of the dead. They say that science is capable of everything, that there is no secret in nature that science cannot discover. What can we answer to these? We shall respond to them this way. You are totally right. We cannot limit the human mind that searches nature. We know that today science knows only a part of the things we have of nature. We also understand that the possibilities of science are great. In this, they are right, and we don't doubt it. What then do we doubt? Why don't we deny religion like them and consider it contrary to scientific knowledge? And he responds this way: just because we believe wholeheartedly that there is a spiritual world, we are certain that apart from the material world, there is an infinite and incomparably superior spiritual world. We believe in the existence of spiritual beings that have higher intellect than us humans. We believe wholeheartedly that above the spiritual and material world, there is the great and almighty God. What we doubt, he says, is the right of science to research with its methods the spiritual world, because the spiritual world cannot be researched with the methods used to research the material world. Such methods are totally inappropriate to research the spiritual world. How do we know that there is a spiritual world? Who told us that it exists? If we are asked by people who do not believe in the divine revelation, we shall answer them thus: our heart told us. For there are two ways for one to know something. The first is that which is spoken by Haeckel. So he's referencing a scientist that was denying religion, which is used by science to learn of the material world. There is, however, another way that is unknown to science and does not wish to know it. It is the knowledge through the heart. Our heart is not only the central organ of the circulation system, it is an organ with which we know the other world and receive the highest knowledge. It is the organ that gives us the capability to communicate with God and the above world. Only in this we disagree with science. Praising the great successes and achievements of science, we do not doubt at all its great importance, and we do not confine the scientific knowledge. We only tell the scientists, you do not have the capability with your methods to research the spiritual world. We, however, can with our heart. There are many unexplainable phenomena which concern the spiritual world that are real, as are some type of material phenomena. There are therefore phenomena that science will never be able to explain because it does not use the appropriate methods. Let science explain how the prophecies appeared on the coming of the Messiah, which were all fulfilled. Could science tell us how the great prophet Isaiah, some 700 years before the birth of Christ, foretold the most important events in his life, and for which he was named the evangelist of the Old Testament? To explain the far-sighted grace possessed by the saints, and to tell us with which physical methods the saints inherited this grace, and how they could understand the heart and read the thoughts of a person they had just met for the first time. And I know people that this has happened to, by the way. They would see a person for the first time and would call him by his name. Without waiting for the visitor to ask, they would answer on what troubled him. If they can, let him explain it to us. Let them explain with what method the saints foretold the great historical events which were accurately fulfilled as they were prophesied. Let them explain the visitation from the other world and the appearance of the dead to the living. They shall never explain it to us because they are too far from the basis of religion, from faith. If you read the books of scientists who try to reconstruct religion, you will see how superficially they look at things. They do not understand the essence of religion, yet they criticize it. Their criticism doesn't touch the essence of faith, since they are unable to understand the types, the expressions of religious feeling. The essence of religion they do not understand. Why not? Because the Lord Jesus says, no one can come to me unless my Father who sent me draws him to me. So it is necessary that we be drawn by the Heavenly Father. It is necessary that the grace of the Holy Spirit enlighten our heart and our mind, to dwell in our heart and mind through this enlightenment, the Holy Spirit, and the ones who are found worthy to receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, those in whose heart lives Christ and his Father, know the essence of the faith. So he closes by saying, they considered poor the person who knew all the sciences yet knew not God. On the other hand, they considered blessed the person who knew God, even if he knew absolutely nothing about worldly things. So those are my closing thoughts. So may we learn how to coexist.
Do you want to add
Amen.
anything like anything events coming up with a church, anything like that? You're free. The floor is yours.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to keep you guys longer, but just I'm here at Holy Cross in Strasbourg, and you're always welcome. I mean, we are coming on the Christmas season now, so we have a lot of different church services coming up and different events, and we're every third Friday of the month, we're also starting to offer a community meal dinner, and for at least November and December, doing a food pantry as well Friday night. So this upcoming Friday from 5 to 6, we'll be having that, and it's once a month at our parish, and and trying to share the light of Christ in the small mountain town of Poconos here in the Pennsylvania. So.
Father, thank you so much for coming up and making time in your very, very busy schedule. And I know you're not feeling good, so thank you for manning up and coming up. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do a quick schedule update and let's get the heck out of here. Where are we? Okay, so Sean is gonna have a show tomorrow. I think he's talking about shyness, I'm not mistaken. And Paul and Coach will be going over Youth to High School Part 2.
Yep.
Wally and David will have a show. They're just throwing me an email in the list, and I'll just have to upload them. And on Saturday, we're gonna have a fun show. Is old school versus new school, an evolution of technology. Man, this has been one of those weeks today. We're talking about evolution. We're talking about this. We're talking about that. I'm like, man. And gray area this Friday. This Sunday is going to be about our special guest Frank. I can't remember his last name off my head right now. He is a active Navy, Air Force. I'm sorry, active Air Force, and he makes a custom builds Iron Man suit. Fascinating guy, actually. I met him once. He's pretty cool. So I accept that. As always, I'm the Spartan. This is Father Constantino, the Witch Doctor, Mr. President. Stay fresh, stay safe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.